Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. This is Taliesin McKnight, and today I wanted to talk about augury, which is divination by the movement of birds, and Agrippa's three books of occult philosophy. The idea that we could divine through bird omens and from the directions that they come from. Augury, um, the practice of looking at the flights of birds for magical practices is many thousands of years old, and it's found in different cultures. The ancient Babylonians, the Hittites, and the Egyptians looked at the flight patterns of birds as signs of omens. And it also goes back to the very root of Greek and Roman culture, the looking at bird omens and the flights of birds. In fact, the founding myth of Rome, of Romulus and Remus, has to do with the reading of bird omens. And of course, there was a college of augurs that served in ancient Rome under the Caesar, a college of augurs that were very much focused on the flight patterns of birds. So, whatever the case may be, whatever people's opinions on augury, and auspices, reading the flight patterns of birds, whatever people's opinions may be, it is very ancient and is something that these ancient religions, pagan religions, took very seriously. And also, it shows us something in Agrippa's three books of occult philosophy, which was written in the 16th century. So we're looking at magic from the 16th century according to Cornelius Agrippa. He talks about ways to read the movements of birds. So what we see here is not just a magic that's done in the room of a castle or in a lodge, but a magic that is very much in tune with nature and the natural world. In chapter 53 of book one of the three books of occult philosophy, he goes into different flight patterns that one can look for. I think it's important if people plan to practice with this use of bird omens to approach it from a slightly skeptical perspective. Obviously, you don't want to get all paranoid based on the movement of birds, but to begin to be open to the messages that are around you and in nature. A couple chapters after this, in three books of occult philosophy in the 16th century, Agrippa goes into the planetary associations of the animal can give clues to what may be shown to you in your life. For example, a martial or warlike animal, an animal that is a predator, an aggressive animal or predator, a bird of prey, like a hawk or something that's a predator, could represent some type of argument or contention or conflict. So this is an example that Agrippa gives, is that martial animals could represent some type of conflict coming up. The eagle is a sign of Jupiter. The eagle in Agrippa is listed as a sign of victory and success, but not without bloodshed. Again, this is an animal of prey. The swan is listed in Agrippa as venereal, and it is associated with the planet Venus. In Agrippa, the swan is generally a token of good luck. Saturnine creatures could portend some type of limitation or restriction at work. So by understanding the language of birds and of animals in Agrippa, as well as plants and stones, we begin to speak the language of magic, which is the natural world. The natural world is the language of magic. And we begin to speak with the anima mundi, or world soul, of Agrippa, the anima mundi, or world soul, through a series of puns, through the use of symbol. So, yeah, I wanted to talk about that. And also, let's talk a little bit about food magic, incorporating food into your magical practice and your witchcraft. So many of the people that watch my videos practice magic and witchcraft and things like that. And food is something that we eat every day. We consume food and we take things in. But foods could be used as a type of magical Eucharist, and we'll go into that as well. For example, today is Thursday. It is Jupiter Day. Um, Consuming foods associated with Jupiter. For example, going back to our favorite classic, the three books of occult philosophy, pears, the pear as a fruit, pears, apples, and plums are associated with Jupiter. So eating a pear or eating a plum, reciting the Orphic hymn to Jupiter at the planetary hour of Jupiter, while focusing on bringing in abundance or good luck, right? So at the hour of Jupiter, taking a plum or an apple, or almonds or any kind of nuts, raisins, anything of a sweet flavor, anything like that, you can recite the Orphic hymn to Jupiter while focusing on bringing in abundance. You know, nutmeg is associated with Jupiter, and some people like to flavor their coffee with a little nutmeg or cinnamon, things like that. A lot of people like to do that anyways, add a little nutmeg or cinnamon or something to your coffee. But nutmeg is actually associated with Jupiter. So another example of food magic, magic, witchcraft in your kitchen, is to put a little bit of nutmeg in your coffee or tea at the hour of Jupiter. Stir it 4 times, number of Jupiter, or 16 times, which is the square of 4, number of Jupiter, and recite the Orphic hymn to Jupiter while focusing on abundance, or good things coming into your life, good luck. So these are just ways that you can incorporate magic into the foods that you eat. You know, going to sleep is a magical act, often used for sleep incubation or oracular things like that. So today, do a little light read for y'all today. Alright, do a little light reading. So we're going to read the 3 books of occult philosophy, book 1, chapter 26. What things are under the power of Jupiter and are called jovial. By the way, I use the older James Freak translation because it is in the public domain, and to not infringe upon anyone's rights or hard work, I read from the older version because it's in the public domain. So we're reading the 3 books of occult philosophy, book 1, chapter 26. What things are under the power of Jupiter and are called jovial. Things under Jupiter. Amongst elements are the air. Makes sense, because Jupiter is king of the sky, right? Jupiter. Or Zeus in the Greek pantheon is Jupiter. Jove, a sky god, right? So things under Jupiter. Amongst elements are the air. Amongst humors, blood. And in the 4 humor theory of the popular at the Renaissance and back to Galen and all of that, blood is the humor associated with the element of air. So things under Jupiter amongst elements are the air, amongst humors, blood, and the spirit of life. Also all things which respect the increase, nourishment, and vegetation of the life. Amongst tastes, and here Agrippa, just like Marsilio Ficino in his 3 books of life, published in the 16th century, talks about consuming different things, having incenses or colors, even color of clothing and things around of a certain planet to bring in its influence. But taste, yes, you can use foods in your magic. So taste. Amongst tastes such as are sweet and pleasant. At its most simplest, if you want to work with Jupiter, if anything that tastes sweet or pleasant. Amongst metals, again, you don't want to eat all these things, you know. We're talking about metals and stones and stuff, you know. But there is some stuff you can incorporate with food magic. But other things besides food. Amongst metals, tin. Yeah, we think of tin as the metal of Jupiter. But he also lists silver and gold by reason of their temperateness. The temperateness referring to the ease with which the metals are worked. So of the metals of Jupiter are tin and also silver and gold by reason of their temperateness. The stones of Jupiter, this stuff is so cool. Again, we're reading from the three books of occult philosophy in the 16th century. The stones of Jupiter, the hyacinth, the beryl, sapphire, the emerald, green jasper, and airy colors. Amongst the plants and trees of Jupiter, sea green, garden basil. Basil. And I just want to digress for a moment to say that if you're doing food magic or incorporating magic into your cooking or your food, you don't have to make every single ingredient of Jupiter. That would be a very boring meal. So if you're trying to do food magic with Jupiter, you don't have to have every single ingredient associated with Jupiter. Just have one or two items that you consecrate to Jupiter. So you have one or two items that you consecrate to Jupiter, and then you add that to whatever you're cooking. So for example, you can make whatever kind of meal, and you take a little garden basil and say the Orphic hymn to Jupiter and put the basil in there. Any kind of mint. Mace, spikes, mints, mastic, elecampane, and things you don't want to eat. The violet, darnel, henbane, the poplar tree, and those which are called lucky trees, as the oak, the tree Aeschylus, which is the horse chestnut, which is like an oak but much bigger, the holm tree, the beech tree, the hazel tree. So the hazel tree is listed as mercurial and of Jupiter in Agrippa. The hazel tree, the service tree, the white fig tree. So white figs are associated with Jupiter if you use white figs in your magic or eating. The pear tree, so the pear. The apple tree, shares it also with Venus. The vine, so grapes. The plum tree, the ash, the dog tree, and the olive tree, and also the oil. So just having olive oil. You can do Jupiter invocation over just olive oil and just add it to your dish. Again, every single item doesn't have to be of the planet. That'd be a very boring meal probably. But one or two ingredients that you consecrate to Jupiter to bring in abundance as a Jupiter magic in the foods you eat. Also, all manner of corn as barley, wheat. So wheat, bread. You can dedicate a loaf of bread to Jupiter for abundance and eat the bread. Also raisins, licorice, sugar, and all such things whose sweetness is manifest. And again, we're reading the three books of occult philosophy here. So raisins, things of Jupiter. Raisins, licorice, sugar, and all such things whose sweetness is manifest. And subtle, partaking somewhat of an astringent and sharp taste, as are nuts, almonds. So nuts and almonds are associated with Jupiter. Pineapples, filberts, pistachio nuts. Sounds like a grocery list, y'all. But no, we're reading Agrippa's three books of occult philosophy, book 1, chapter 26, with things are under Jupiter and called jovial. Amongst roots, peony, myrobalos, rhubarb, and manna. And of course, not all things are edible here. He's talking about incense here. Orpheus ad storax. Where it says Orpheus ad storax, he's talking about the Orphic hymn to Jupiter. Amongst animals, such as have some stateliness and wisdom in them, and those which are mild, well trained up, and of good disposition, as the hart is a male deer, and elephant, and those which are gentle as sheep and lambs. Amongst birds, those that are of a temperate complexion as hens, together with the yolk of their eggs. So it's interesting, Agrippa lists in the chapter on the moon, the whites of eggs are lunar, of the moon, but the yolk of the egg of Jupiter. So you had some scrambled eggs, Jupiter eggs. Also the partridge, we're laughing, but yeah, this is serious magic. Things that you can do with your magic practice, things you do anyways. Also the partridge, the pheasant, the swallow, the pelican, the cuckoo, the stork, birds given to a kind of devotion, which are emblems of gratitude. The eagle is dedicated to Jupiter. She is the ensign of emperors and an emblem of justice and clemency. Amongst fish, the dolphin, the fish called anchovy, the sheathfish by reason of his devoutness. So it's pretty interesting stuff. And then also the three books of occult philosophy, chapter 53, goes into animal omens. I don't think I'm going to read all of those, but of course, just looking at the planetary association of the animal, could, give you a clue to what it's trying to tell. Martial animals can show that there's some kind of conflict or contention or whatever kind of animal, right? An eagle can represent victory, but not without bloodshed. Swans are venereal, so are positive. Owls are given kind of a bad rap, and Agrippa is fatal animals, but also represents watchfulness. So paying attention to the things in your, if you see weasels or foxes are associated with Mercury, you may think that the weasels or fox could represent some type of cunning taking place, or some type of deceit or sleight of hand. Anyways, the three books of occult philosophy, book 1, chapter 53 of divination and its kinds. There are some other kinds of divinations depending upon natural causes, which are known to everyone in his art and experience to be in diverse things, by which physicians, farmers, shepherds, mariners, people on the sea, and every one of these out of probable signs do prognosticate. Many of these kinds Aristotle made mention of in his Book of Times, amongst which augury and auspices are the chiefest, which were in former time in much esteem amongst the Romans. So some are called augury, which are taken from birds. Some are celestial, which are taken from thundering and lightning. Some are called caduca, when any fell in the temple, or like something falls over during a ceremony. Which is interesting. Some were sacred, as were taken from sacrifices. People often read candle magic remains after doing a candle spell. Some of these were called piacula, and sad auspices, as when a sacrifice escaped from the altar, being smitten made a bellowing, or fell upon another part of the body than it should. To these is added exauguration, when the rod fell out of the hand of the augur, with which it was the custom to view and to take notice of the auspicium. Michael Scotus makes mention of 12 kinds of auguries, 6 on the right hand, the names of which are Fer Nova, Fer Vetus, Confert, and Ponentum, Sonus or Nova, Sonus or Vetus, and the other 6 on the left hand, the names of which are Confer Nova, Confer Vetus, Viarum, Heronum, Scasser Nova, and Scasser Vetus. So this is interesting. He lists different directions of birds. So again, this is a magic. I made a video recently about the gaze and fascination in Agrippa, that looking upon someone with a strong imagination and emotion for Agrippa is a form of bewitching. Every culture around the world talks about the evil eye, but it's not just the evil eye. It could also be used for blessing, and for bringing abundance, and for love enchantments. Also, Agrippa lists this. Again, I don't make any moral, I just talk about the magic. People come to their own conclusion, but Agrippa mentions on the chapter of fascination, chapter 50, the use of eye drops or cauteries to enhance the powers of a magician's eyes. So, for example, Jupiterian eye drops for confidence, or, venereal for love enchantments through the power of the magic gaze. And here we have a magic that's very much associated with the earth and paying attention to what's around us in nature. So Fer Nova, we'll give a few examples, is an augury. When thou goest out of thy house to do any business, and in going thou seest a man or a bird going, or flying, so that either of them set himself before thee on thy left hand, that is a good signification in reference to thy business. So if you see a bird, just as you see it, it's moving, and it lands on the left side, that's called Fer Nova, and it's a good sign to your business. Fer Vetus is an augury, when thou shalt go out of thy house for to do thy business, and in going thou finds or sees a bird or a man resting himself before thee on the left side of thee. That is an ill sign in reference to your business. So Fer Vetus is you go outside to go do something, and something's already still sitting there on the left side. Viarum is an augury, when a man or a bird in his journey, or flying, passeth before thee, coming from the right side of thee, and bending to the left, goes out of thy sight. That is a good sign concerning thy business. So Viarum is you see something flying on the right side, goes to the left, and goes out of your sight to the left. that is a good sign in reference to your business. Confervetus, no, confernova is an augury when thou dost first find a man or bird going or flying. So as you're seeing it, it's moving. And then he rest himself before thee on thy right side. Thou seeing of it, it is a good sign concerning thy business. So confernova is an augury where you see a bird flying and it stops at your right side. So it's an interesting type of language taking place. Something's flying, it lands on your left side. That's fernova. It's a good omen. Something flying and it lands on your right side. It's a good omen. But if you come out, it's still and on the left, then that is fervetus, which is an ill omen. If you see a bird flying, it's coming from the right and goes to the left and keeps passing. That is a good omen. Another omen it mentioned in Penonenthum, I think it's when the bird flies from the left to the right and goes out of your sight. So it's just an interesting idea. Again, we don't need to get caught up in these omens and things or get lost or paranoid, but it's an interesting thing to watch for, to pay attention to the things around us, to notice what kind of wildlife and what kind of things we have. But yeah, augury, you don't hear a whole lot about augury anymore. I guess it fell out of popularity after the fall of ancient Rome. But Agrippa, they were still doing it. Again, these weren't just magicians in their castle rooms or in a lodge. These were magicians that were outside and they noticed a golden flower that looked solar. And then they see a bee or they see a certain bird, and being in touch with, different bones or feathers and things that you find in nature and using these in your magic, understanding the language of nature, of trees and plants and animals, and also, like I said, food magic. Adding a little nutmeg, today's Jupiter, the day of Jupiter, it can't hurt, right? At the hour of Jupiter, put a little nutmeg in your coffee, y'all, and say the Orphicum to Jupiter for good luck. Stir it a few times and drink it. These are just simple ways to add magic to your everyday life. So anyways, you could light a blue candle to add to the intent. But that's just a little bit. I wanted to talk a little bit about bird omens and about signs in nature in Agrippa, augury, and a little bit about food magic. So happy Thursday, everyone. I hope y'all enjoyed my video, and I hope y'all have a great day. All right, have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.